Thanks guys for all coming here today. I know we've been a little bit off schedule with our typical AMA timing and dates. Apologies for that. But we are here now. Really excited to see, everything that you guys have been doing in game. But I know that this conversation is really about, what we're doing and what your questions are. However, I want to start us off with some stats. I think this will help maybe draw out some questions, and I think it's just going to be fun in general. So, first off, huge shout out to Bruckmar. He has made a Dune dashboard with quite a few stats. So, if you haven't already seen that, I can link that if you don't already have the link. And so, I'll just go ahead and say a few of them. Total extractions that we have seen so far 33,802. That's a lot of extractions. Tons extracted, we have just over 100 million tons. So, wow. And then sway spent on ships. I've got 404 million sway, and that is including, well, actually, I don't know if all of these have been sold, but ships built, we have 703 thus far. As for maybe just a call out to the top miner, going back to extractions, this is crew 3814. I don't have the name of this crew and I don't know who you are in this Discord, but feel free to shout yourself out if you're here. 109 extractions and 242 samples taken. And then across the board, crews recruited, not crewmates, 11,442. We have a lot more data points, but I just picked out some of my favorite. That's a whole lot of mining, extracting, sales, building. Across the board, we're seeing, Adalia Prime filling up more and more, and we're seeing people get out to their own asteroids and start to produce infrastructure more and more. I know myself personally, I just sent 7 ships off of Adalia Prime to my own asteroid, so I'm really excited to see how colonization effort goes on my own asteroid. I hope you guys are enjoying doing that for yourselves. Chris, do you have any other stats or anything you wanna give out? I don't know if you have anything personal that you'd like to share.
I'm going to share that the name of that crew is Easy Dudes Min 1, of course.
We all know Easy Dude's Min One. Yeah, I mean, naming convention there, minor. Okay, so look, guys, we have plenty of updates to give here. Chris, myself, and Proto can share some stuff towards the back end of this conversation. But before we dive into that, I'd really like to open it up to you guys. Just type in your questions or unmute yourself and ask your questions, and we'd be happy to answer. Please.
Maybe questions about the tank farm,
Yeah.
which I'd be surprised if anybody here didn't know, but if not, the tank farm is now available. It was shipped earlier today, maybe a couple hours ago. So if you're looking to build a volume optimized warehouse, now's the time.
And it's worth noting that it looks like Darkos did, in fact, get in the limitations on being able to put fluids in there. So you could only put things that are actually like gases or liquids into the tank farm, plus the 2 powders. So silica powder or tungsten powder. So,
Yeah, and that's sort of I'll say a somewhat temporary. I'm not exactly sure what time frame temporary is in that sense, but we want to push towards the ability to have multiple inputs for processes. And at that point, ideally, we can remove that sort of kludge that allows for um, those extra materials. They're basically allowed there so that you can run processes from a single warehouse, or in this case, tank farm.
yep, if you want to make a propellant, we won't need those at some point.
Yeah, so we have one typed question so far here from Thunder. The question is, now that the tutorial is out, what's next in line from the team?
Yeah, so tutorial was a pretty significant effort. Hopefully, if if you guys haven't played with it, not that most of you would need it, but if you haven't played with it, I'd recommend it. It's pretty cool. I think it's going to really improve the new player experience. Provide sort of a short free to play introduction to influence, and I think it gives a really good idea of how the game works, what you can do. It gives you a bit of immersion in the atmosphere. Um, but yeah, the other piece that we were working on in parallel there was how we bring new buildings and ultimately new content in an iterative way. The first thing being the tank farm. But as you all know, we have talked in the past about building out the sort of mini hab. That's definitely going to be a focus now. Now that the tank farm is complete, um, as well as in general starting to pursue a more modular building framework that can hopefully support things like having a mini hab and a hab in the same sort of progression, where you might consider them both just habitats that have different capacities that you could upgrade, and they are different levels of building of the sort of the same building. So we're looking at pursuing that. There's also several changes that we're looking at with leases. There's been a lot of requests for making leases transferable. That's going to be a focus as well. And there are many others, but of course, as we are working towards discovery, I've said this before, I've typed it before in general, but we're looking at building in a iterative way. So discovery will certainly have a single large release, but there will be a lot of what's coming in discovery happening over time as we build.
Ja. Hey. Zijn we weer blij? Nog goed gekookt voor je?
Wasterly, just hey, Wasterly, just FYI, I put you on mute just because I could hear you. No big deal. I'll unmute you in a second if you want to type in and say you're good.
I've got a question for you. If this is Brian,
Yeah, what's up?
how you doing?
Good.
Good. Yeah, I was wondering how the markets are going as far as modules, components, and whether you guys are still looking at potentially doing some buy orders, or what your feelings on those. The buy orders, as in the council doing buy orders.
Yeah,
Defer
I
on that.
can speak to that one. Yes, we are definitely still considering buy orders. I would say that it's not going to be module. It's not going to be modules. It's going to be, intermediate product. We're looking at it at this point. I can't share which ones yet, but I expect those probably fairly soon. The idea there is just to sort of provide some additional stimulus for people to sort of explore beyond the comfortable bounds of, mining water and maybe making some salts and maybe making some cement. Like there's purchase to be had higher up the production chains, and we just want to encourage people to do that, or the prime time told us. So yeah, you guys can refer to that.
So this isn't necessarily exactly a question, but Skepo is asking, for us to prioritize quality of life improvements over new content. I don't know. Maybe we want to make a comment around that, because I think a lot of the features that we are pushing out are kind of features that are big quality of life improvements. But I understand your question, Skepo, of like the things that people are requesting to be changed or updated, to focus on those. Chris, do you have any comments there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that quality of life is definitely a focus. Most of what we have been pushing has been quality of life. Our dual focuses over the last, since launch have been quality of life and the new player experience, because we're of course focused on building the player base, bringing in new life into Adalia, and then the other piece has been primarily quality of life, with this tank farm really being the first new feature. But there's a lot more in quality of life. Some of them sort of float into feature territory, like I said, with the idea of transferable leases. Like I think that is technically a new feature, but it's also a huge quality of life improvement. So we're going to try to have a good balance there. We certainly don't want the game to get stale. We want to make sure that we're continuing on our path towards discovery, while also making sure that the game is fun to play and that you're not feeling bogged down. So it's a balance, and we're going to keep pursuing that balance, and obviously taking all of your feedback and seeing when we're maybe leaning too far in one direction or the other.
To follow up on this, question from Skippy is just, how is our bug backlog looking? What's that? What's that look like? We don't usually pull the curtain back on that, and I don't think we're going to go through the list of what we actually have here, but maybe just some general information on how we prioritize things, and maybe that would help, Chris.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's shorter than it used to be, which is great. I think in general, we've talked before about how the bug list is prioritized, but it's sort of as you'd expect, right? Like things that are game breaking are certainly first and foremost. Um, and I would say within that category, if it's game breaking in the contract, then it's drop everything. That has happened once thus far. Everything was dropped and very quickly it was fixed. But then from there, if there's anything that is preventing players from completing some game action. So if you can't do something, that's a priority, whether it's because of server or the client or some combination thereof or a wallet. That's the main priority. So like right now, been brought to our attention that Argent Mobile is having issues, and that's a priority at the moment. We want to make sure that all of the wallets we support are working appropriately. If we see some change that was pushed from Argent or from us, where there's some compatibility issue, we're going to make sure that that's fixed as quickly as possible. And then we kind of move down the line. The next highest prioritized items are game actions that you can basically implement a workaround to complete them, but they're not able to be completed in the way that they should be. Then we continue on down from there. Display issues where you can play, but the data that you're seeing is incorrect or incomplete about about the actions you're going to take, and then eventually just purely cosmetic issues. So we just move down that list. Sometimes maybe there's a bug that's near and dear to you. It was mentioned that it was highly prioritized, and then maybe it gets pushed down by some of those other issues that were higher priority. But in general, we try to move down that list as quickly as we can, and generally in that order.
Thank you. I think that's just generally helpful to understand how we prioritize. Okay, so a few questions. I know we briefly already touched on this topic, but what is the current pre-discovery vision for a modular hab, and how would this look like in the future with other buildings and customization? I don't know how deep we want to go into that at this point, Proto, Chris. But
yeah, you can touch quickly on that.
Yeah, maybe just a little bit on that.
Yeah, I mean, just for context, like up to basically this week, we've been focused almost entirely on the new player experience stuff. Haven't had a lot of a chance to explore the new mechanics like the mini hab will be. But to give an outline of where we're sort of thinking about that, the idea is that the habitat that we have now is actually could be a very highly upgraded version of a habitat, and there might be much lower tiers that would be possible to build that require a lot less materials and time, and that would be sort of the mini hab idea. Obviously, implementing a modular upgrade system like that is considerably more work than just adding a new building and solving the mini hab and being good for now. So it's possible that we would just do that and then add sort of an upgrade, allow those two buildings to be interpreted as the same building at different points on the spectrum in the future. But it's also possible that we would just decide to sit down and sort of hash out those upgrade mechanics now and get them in as the first example of that being the hab. TBD on that. But we're definitely starting to think about that since the mini hab has been a highly requested feature, and we know that it will help a lot with colonization of especially small asteroids. So it's definitely on your list to think about. These kinds of questions are sort of cropping up a lot more as we go forward towards discovery. Is like, here's something we know that we want to do in discovery, and there's some instance of it that's higher priority than others. Do we try to go full steam on the actual discovery mechanic, or do we just put in a quick version of it that we'll do for now, and then it later gets merged into the discovery mechanic? So these are all things that we are now starting to talk about now that we have more time with the a lot of the new player features in finally after a long time of working on them.
Thanks, Proto. Okay, so next question we have from Groove is any thoughts on built-in collaboration tools such as guild vaults, revenue sharing tools, priority pricing, that sort of thing? Yeah, I think Chris, you probably want to take that one. I mean, I have some thoughts, but I think your opinion would be better.
I have more questions than answers. It all sounds very interesting. I wonder. I know that we have some work and collaboration to do with community devs in the community on how custom contracts work and permissioning works. A lot of those feel like the sorts of things that we can develop as a community. But certainly, I'm more than open to having built-in collaboration tools where it makes sense. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the details on each of those things. I mean, if you want to unmute and tell us a bit or type it out, either way, they sound interesting.
I see Groove typing, so I don't think he's going to unmute himself. He's probably at work, secretly listening here.
Yeah, please do. I mean, I think ultimately, like, this is a social game, so if there's things that can help social play, they should be a priority.
It sounds like he'll type something up for us later and send it. Thanks, Groove, for the question. All right, Demos. Heard from Chavot that UG has the ability to flag stolen asteroids or other NFTs in OpenSea, preventing them from being traded. May I ask what is UG's position on this?
My position is I don't know how to do that. I didn't know that was an option. I've never seen that option. But if someone can help me out with that, I will consider it more.
Yeah, and I'll also mention that it has been discussed in the past, and as you would expect, it's a very contentious issue, since it sort of represents a centralized, like us taking an asset that theoretically belongs to somebody and rendering it, less useful in certain ways. Maybe that outweighs maybe the good of doing that and in preventing theft of NFTs is worth that. Maybe not. It's just one of those things that I think bears more discussion before actually deciding on anything.
I've also. Oh no, go for it.
I think what would be an interesting line of thought is, given that the goal and the ultimate endpoint for influence is a community operated game, how would a community deal with that, or how would the community want to deal with that? Is it something where the preference would be hands off, or the preference would be to have some sort of presumably messy but democratic decision-making process on flagging these things? I don't expect it will know the answer to that right now, but I think it is a pretty interesting question.
Yeah, I think I'll just make a comment here too, is that I personally think from a team's perspective, it's really sticky because what if someone just reports that an asteroid is stolen to us that it's not, and it gets marked that way? I mean, obviously there's, I think, some ways to prove that it's legitimate, but I also see it as something that we would constantly have to manage from a centralized, point here, and I'm very apprehensive about that. I mean, ultimately, we don't own your assets. We don't control your assets. Your security of your assets in your own account is yours. And if someone were to fake, being a certain person saying I own this one and it was stolen from me, I don't know what that would lead to. I think that's an angle of sabotage that personally I'm not excited to want to visit.
What we need is zero knowledge police reports.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, was there someone trying to speak? I'm not sure if I thought I heard someone on mute.
She's in her own door.
I think it might just be Supernova. Nova, you've got a hot mic on.
I'm muted for now.
Okay. All right, let's see here. Another question is, are we able to track new players, their progress and retention, or why they leave? I mean, you're able to see on StarkScan, players coming into the game by, amount of people using the contract daily, and then the Dune dashboard also has some pretty good info. As for information past that, no, the community does not have access to additional analytics.
You're asking, are we able to? Are you able to track players?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, Chris, I'll let you take that question there then. But in case they're talking about kind of themselves or the community, it doesn't go as deep as like full analytics.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, we do some tracking, some privacy preserving tracking on new players to understand like what our funnel looks like, how new players come in, get through the simulation or the training tutorial steps, and ultimately if they start the funding process and buy a starter pack. The last question, why they leave, is of course the hardest one to answer. It's sort of one that we have to guess at somewhat and assume, but it's been a big focus of the last month or so, looking at the funnel and really understanding like where we lose people, and trying to divine why that is, and try to address those issues. Some of the biggest whys that we came up with initially were that the game is complex and people were dropped into the game client and then had very little idea of what to do. And so introducing the simulation and the training was a big way for us to try and give people exposure right away and some immersion right away and understand what Influence is about, what the setting is, what they'd be doing, what type of game it is, and hopefully get them to the point where they feel some commitment, as they'll have created a crewmate with a name and played through some portion of Influence before needing to decide whether or not they'd like to pay some money to actually move forward and keep playing. The other piece there is that this is sort of on the divining side, but understanding how we as strategy gamers typically play. A lot of times we'll discover a new game and then dive into a wiki or resources online to really understand what the game is about, how to play, what our plans are. Maybe even before spending any money on a game, we'll figure out exactly what we want to do, and that's great. Like that's why we're all here. But we realized a while back that the wiki was sort of subpar for where we needed it to fulfill that purpose and that need. And so we have spent a lot of effort on getting the wiki up to snuff so that people can dive in there and sink their teeth in, get lost in the mechanics, lost in a good way, in the mechanics of Influence, and be really ready to play when they're done. But yes, in general, we do have some visibility, and we keep looking at that to try to keep refining how we get new players into Influence.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, so some questions around, I'm going to lump these together, but essentially the difference between how you can schedule actions like extraction, but you can't do that for market buys and sells, and anything market related. Maybe we want to, Chris, you could talk a little bit about, is this possible? Could we make that change? And then, is it something we are considering?
Yeah, we probably are going to make that change. The reason in general that, well, the generally the idea of how we think about market orders is that we want to ensure there is some time spent for generally the merchants to be moving from their Hab to the market to create limit orders. You may have seen that the requirement for the goods, for the materials to actually go, maybe I'm speaking too early. Not sure if this has been implemented yet, but there's a couple things that we're doing. One being that the goods won't need to go back from a marketplace to the warehouse and then back to the marketplace again for updating market orders. They will still require some crew time, but we will also be allowing for this sort of queuing mechanic when it comes to creating limit orders soon.
There's a pretty good question here from Groove that I think is worth just saying out loud here. With the new wiki being up, if you guys haven't seen it, highly recommend you guys dive into it. There's still work needing to be done, but overall it's a massively improved experience there. This is meant to be community managed over time. Right now it is gated, but I would say that the gate is more of just one you need to, say, hey, can I come in? And I can give permission to those who actually want to help with the wiki. There probably needs to be a little bit of a discussion internally on exactly what we're okay with that. But right now we do have some wiki mods. Proto and I have been working on these documents pretty heavily, or the pages being built out. And in the future, yes, we would like it to be completely community managed in the most part, or for the most part. So anyone here in the audience who loves writing and wants to contribute, feel free to ping me. Okay, so I don't see a ton of new questions here being typed up just yet, but a question for you guys to potentially get some more conversation going here is, what have you enjoyed most in this game, and where do you see that expanding, and then also where are you still finding the biggest challenges in this game when it comes to actual mechanics. I'm curious to get you guys' thoughts, and this is an opportunity that we can talk about it a little bit, other than you guys just posting it in feature requests or in general saying you like or you don't like. Feel free to just unmute yourself and talk, or chat. Either way is totally fine.
One thing I'll say personally, just simply I do play the game considerably, is that this is an asteroid colonization game, and I've been personally doing that in the game, and I think it has worked really well so far at being an asteroid colonization game. Like, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of little individual decisions and strategic thoughts I've had to put into getting a rock built out to any reasonable extent. And so when you see it happening, like when you see the buildings popping up on your rock and it's starting to look like an actual city on this other asteroid that isn't AP, it is very satisfying. Like I am very happy with that experience of colonizing a rock. So hopefully you guys feel the same. I will say though that that is very sort of a transient thing. Like you can only build out your rock once. Obviously it takes a while. It takes months, maybe even years, depending on how long you're taking with it. But at a certain point you have a rock, it is built out, and the question is what comes next. Like, what is the next step to running your colony? And obviously there's a lot you can be doing there, but we do want to add more mechanics that will make it a richer experience to have your colony already there, to manage it, to be doing other things with it. So right now exploitation really is very heavily focused on build out. I think that's sort of like the core mechanic of exploitation is constructing things and getting to places so that you can construct them, and getting materials so that you can construct things. And so we are very aware that that lasts for a period of time, but then it's sort of you need to have new things to do with the stuff you've already built. So enjoy that phase while it lasts, and we are putting down the tracks in front of the train right now to support doing things with your colonies once they're built. I'll say that.
Yeah, it's been an experience for a lot of us who maybe have asteroids already and sway to go out and build things on our asteroids. But I think a lot of new players won't get there for quite some time. So it's definitely a balance there. I've been having also an absolute blast. I have 15 more days or 14 more days now until I get to my asteroid. So crossing my fingers that scan is in my favor there. But yeah, sorry, didn't mean to take the stage from someone. I think I saw someone unmuting themselves. Maybe I'm mistaken. But okay, well, I mean, if you guys don't have conversation or questions or topics that you want to bring up about game features and things like that here, then just keep letting us know in the general channels, support and feature requests. We are collecting all of those, and Chris sees plenty of them being pushed into the team's logs. So let's see here. Maybe we want to just dive into a few of the updates, Chris. I know. Oh, Redacted, you unmuted yourself. You have a question?
No, it's me, Olmops. While we're at it, I had a question or some potential discussion about the upcoming quests that you already put into the game client, but they're not active yet, as far as I know.
Yeah.
More specific, there's let's say I had a look at them and I thought, okay, which ones of those I could potentially pursue? And the ones for the more complex buildings, let's say the market, the habitat, and the shipyard, I think they do not really make much sense to me. And I wanted to ask whether anyone else feels the same, because let's take the shipyard. So for let's say for an extractor, it's pretty much straightforward. Build an extractor, mine 10K ore. I think that's a good quest, because it's straightforward and you would do this anyway. But then I have build a shipyard and manufacture a ship. So when I build a shipyard in the first place on an asteroid, my first objective is not to build a ship, because the production chains for a ship, that's the hell of a production chain. So that's pretty much the last thing I would ever do on an asteroid. So I built the shipyard because I need the modules for building additional buildings. So, I mean, this quest, I will hardly fulfill it, and if then only because I would shuttle in the components of a ship. And I would do this only for solving this quest, and this doesn't make too much sense for me. So,
I mean, at the end of the day, you can build ships with shipyards, and that quest was set up.
That's correct.
That quest was set up
correct.
to, make it so that someone with a shipyard and then then a ship being built supplied the reward. I mean, could there have been other options? Yeah, absolutely. Could there be more options in the future? Yes, absolutely. But I think as the quest exists, I mean, it makes sense. I think it's just challenging. And
it's very challenging.
And it's not meant to be easy. These quests, regardless of rewards it's like, these are things to strive for. May take time, and we may not see them completed, immediately. We didn't want them to be completed immediately. These are goals that you can set for yourself and others can, kind of compete for. And I think that's quite fun. Will these expand in the future? I would love to see additional, in-game missions and things like that. As for when these will go live in general, the way that they exist, this is something that I continue to try and push forward. I can't, give a lot of information on why it's taken this long, but there's been some circumstances that have been needing to be addressed, and they now continue to work on the project. So I'm really hoping to see that finalized soon, and you guys will be able to complete those missions.
Okay, thanks.
Let's see here. Sorry, I'm looking at community questions or the chat here, seeing if there's anything else. if anyone else has questions, feel free to just hop in too. Oh, maybe this is less of a question, but I see Thunder, talking about, you know, a PvP kind of tower defense style engagement. I think that Chris and I both, oh, actually, I think the entire team would absolutely love to see additional games and things like that built on top of Influence using the assets that are there. I know that this comment is more about like what is conflict going to look like, but I personally think that we have the opportunity to see many more many more applications on top of Influence's assets by the time conflict arrives as well. So maybe we have multiple ways to enjoy combat if that's what we desire.
I'm actually building a game with my kids around our assets. So just kind of on the side for fun with them. Maybe you guys will see that soon enough.
Yeah, I don't know if any of you guys have played one of those old Flash games where you'd like spin tiles to try and move a line the furthest around to the end of the like hexagon map, and you get more points the further your line travels through as you place tiles. On the weekend, my buddy and I are paper prototyping something like that, and he hopes to be able to program that eventually and utilize the Influence buildings to supply like power-ups when you get one as a tile. Hopefully that's not the same game you're making, Chris.
No, it's not at all. I did want to point out, which I think is pretty cool, there has been a lot of interest in API keys recently. So Influence has an API. It's outlined a bit in the SDK README on GitHub, but there's been a lot of interest in it lately. And it's, I think, pretty cool. We have 30 API keys now issued. I think probably half of them in the last few weeks. So there's a lot of development ongoing, which is exciting to see, and I think we'll see more and more of these awesome community tools coming out in the near future.
Skippy.
And also, I guess, a push that if you are interested in building one, you should reach out, and we can talk about issuing an API key as well.
Colgan, about the comment you made, will mini Habs count for missions? They were originally designed for larger habitats. I think that's just going to require some internal discussion on whether or not, we want to include either another mission or have mini Habs count for that. But I think that the habitat is a pretty massive building, and mini Habs are not going to be as massive, so there's some consideration there.
Audio test.
Yep, we can hear you.
Is it possible to put a little bit more energy into GPU settings? I'm struggling with a lot of crashes anytime I do resource maps, heat maps.
Yeah, I can do that. Could you send me some info on kind of hardware and where you're running into issues?
Sure thing, thank you.
Yeah, something I also, maybe this is a good point to make here. When you guys have issues like that, it would be really good to understand like what kind of system you're working on, because sometimes people have really good equipment and they're seeing crashes, and other people have old equipment and seeing crashes, and so trying to figure out exactly what's causing it. Is it a particular GPU? Do you have hardware acceleration on those types of things are super helpful, especially because I'm not a developer. So when I go and report things to Chris, saying things like person computer crash isn't super helpful. So the more information you can give me, the better it'll help the team here. Yeah, I mean that goes for most reports. That's just generally going to be a lot more helpful if you can give us as much information as possible. Okay, so we've got a question from Brian. How is the Asteroid route planner update coming? It's been tricky to do simulated speed, pause, unpause, resets, because this resets the planner, and potentially able to have multiple asteroid routes linking during the simulation. I know that we've, in passing talked about like the current flight system and UI, and maybe where it's lacking currently. I don't know, Chris or Proto, do you guys want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that there is no current update in the works, but we are also highly aware that that system does need to be reworked, especially just bug fixes. There's a number of sort of glitchy aspects to it right now that really, are impacting its usability. But to your point, like actually being able to simulate, moving forward and backwards in time is actually very tough right now, even just using the system as it's designed. It's sort of a very crude tool for doing something that's actually a very finely detailed thing in the end. So I would definitely say that, like, on our internal list of higher priority updates, it is there to revamp the asteroid route planner, fix any bugs with it, make it be a more usable experience. As for the sort of linking multiple asteroids or routes during the simulation, that starts to become, infinitely complex if you sort of let it. But that possibility of like chaining multiple routes together, I think our goal would probably be just to support, you know, planning a single route really well, and then being able to immediately jump into planning the next route from that point, from like the arrival time plus from that first route. But as for like the sort of how to chain together a large sequence of hops between asteroids most efficiently, that starts to become in the realm of a community tool that somebody might want to build or think about. So we just want to give you sort of the basic tool to plan a trip, and then sort of do with that what you will, I would say. But yeah, definitely on our list to make the current one work better and have better, improved UX.
Yeah, and I definitely want to bring back the old periodic
Yes.
chart.
Yes. That was super
I
helpful.
always really like that when we sort of moved away from it to the pork chop plot, which I think is still needed. But I'd love for them to be both present. I think it gives a lot of information very quickly.
I see Star Wars Freak is typing something, so there's probably one more question coming. But at that point, I think we can probably, give any last updates if there are any, and we can close it out. But yeah, guys, I just want to reiterate, we are tirelessly working to improve current game mechanics, research new features, and ensure all our tech partners, Argent, StarkNet, everything, are doing what they can to ensure reliability. This is a massive effort, and we're really excited to have you here, and we're also really excited to get new players in, and we are doing that work right now to get new players in. So we'll keep growing day by day. Star Wars Freak, was there any discussion around the UI updates to enter a target end time for a certain process? No, we haven't discussed that at all. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask the questions that you'd like?
Oh, sure. Sorry. This is one of those things that had popped up in like 20 different corners of Discord at different times, but it was the idea that when setting processes, extraction times, refinery processes, that sort of thing, you could enter a target time rather than just use a slider to estimate either SRs or time done. So this would be particularly useful for, say, oh, okay, well, I'm playing Influence for me mostly between 9 a.m. and a little after noon. So if I can line up my processes that way rather than using the sliders, it becomes a little bit easier to sort of manage. And I just didn't know if there had been any conversation about that or what.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that similar to the discussion of the. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I said no, but I like the idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say that similar to the.
Very straightforward change. That's I think pretty impactful. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people want to plan the processes around a certain time in real life. I will say that we have been tracking a major update to the way that times in general are displayed for processes. Currently it's this sort of haphazard set of little pills and bubbles and numbers all scattered all over the action planning UI to sort of piece together what the actual timeline of an action is. We would love to make that be much more cohesive and much more visually sort of easy to figure out what's going on. And being able to enter a finish time for an action would be a very natural fit for that. Which is not to say that we need to gate adding a finish time by with that new UI, just that it will fit well with it once we get to it. We're definitely thinking about timing in general for actions.
Yeah, I like it. I like the idea. I want to play on Thursday after 5 p.m., so I'm going to type that in.
So I see a question about Argent and Sessions. I want to answer. So ArgentX Session stability, we've worked with them back and forth, and there's not a lot that we can do. It turns out, but the good news is that less than 2 weeks from now, the problem should be largely resolved with the much shorter confirmation times that we'll be getting from StarkNet. I will also add that if you are using ArgentX Sessions and you are happy enough to use Sway as a fee token, the issue will also just be not present at all. So really this issue is right now limited to using ArgentX Sessions with Ether or Starks as your fee token. And again, that should be largely resolved in the next 2 weeks by the update to StarkNet that's coming soon.
2-second processing time.
Yep.
Okay, so another question here from Biggie. Are there any plans to allow for multi-asteroid marketplace search? We traders need a way to find demand without knowing what exact asteroid the demand is coming from.
So I think this is something that we could do. It's certainly a possibility, but I would love to see this happen as a community-led effort. I think like there's so much data that you could find a way to show that I think there's limitations on how much we could display without being like a fully fledged markets tool. When I've seen this type of tool built in the past in other MMOs and especially in the case of Eve, they are often built by the community. I also think it's a really interesting opportunity for a community project that could even charge, because I think that there could be a lot of interesting insights gleaned from a tool like that to find those opportunities. There could be a lot of value brought. I would love to see that happen. If it doesn't, at some point, I think we would probably build it, but it's a little bit of a ways down right now on our priority list.
Yeah, I would say that speaking of marketplaces, I know that this is a topic that's been brought up a lot, and it's probably about to be brought up, so I'll just say it first. But the notifications, there's been quite a few reports recently and discussions around kind of being able to see notifications of like when your stuff sells, if you have a buy or limit order in your crew log. Chris, maybe you could talk about like, is this possible? Like, are we able to showcase, if a limit buy order is filled, the person who placed it maybe 2 weeks ago, getting notified in their log somewhere?
I'm not quite sure the question because you are notified right now.
So,
do you mean if you're not in the client?
No, like right now, like, limit, there's very few notifications that are sent when you're making trades other than like you placed limit sell order. When it actually comes through, at least from my testing yesterday with this, when it was filled, the person who placed the order, didn't get a notification that it was filled in my crew log. It was the person who filled it, had the notification. So that maybe I'm misinformed here, but I did some testing yesterday and I was not seeing the tag.
You're saying you didn't see it in your crew log?
Correct. I can go.
It's also happened here.
I think you do see it in your crew log, but you don't get a pop-up message you sold something. So I have to actively search my crew log for sales.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, let me check my crew here, Chris, because maybe it was just that it took 10 minutes or something. But when they filled it, I didn't see anything come through on my end.
Yeah, when limit cells are filled, I think you do get a pop up and B a crew log item. However, there are other combinations where you do not. And I think it would definitely be great to get that. And also, I would love to see fees coming in as a marketplace owner. I'd love to see just messages every time something sells in my crew log. And you get anytime your sway changes, basically.
Yeah, I think we have definitely discussed a need for like a more like a sway ledger around market activity. So that's likely to come, and we've discussed it on and off for the last few weeks. It would be basically a supplement to the crew log, which I think is ideally a little bit more interesting from a non-market ledger or non list of filled orders point of view. So it's definitely something that we're considering.
Yeah, to Javis or Illyrium's point that if you do see it in the crew log, but it doesn't persist in the logged events advanced search. So some of those would be nice to get in there. I think we have a bug for that.
Okay, I'm back. I'm looking at my crew now. It does look like it came through, so this was just a matter of it not popping up at the time that I was in. But
And you do have to have that crew active. It can't be just any crew active. You have to have that particular crew active to see the thing pop in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that a lot of that stuff too, and I know this is a bigger feature that Chris has been working on, is the wallet level permissions. I think that at that time, seeing everything across your wallet, like Chris was saying, with a kind of wallet level system, that might be very helpful to people so that they can keep track of all of these things.
Is that the same as wallet level notifications? Because I know that's been asked and talked about quite a bit as well.
It's not necessarily the same, but it could be in the same vein. And it may be in the same vein. Most likely it'll come in two steps, though, with the permissions being first.
Thanks for dropping that picture, Brian. Yeah, that's confirmed on my end, too. There's just some lag time, I guess, on my end.
You mean the Nathan Fillion picture?
The Nathan Fillion?
12 messages up still.
Yeah, I see it.
I think that the
sorry, I'm scrolling through here. I was like, "What are you talking about?" All I see is Brian's picture, but I get it now.
I guess that kind of leads to another question, because I think I mentioned this in the chat, but one of the reasons why it's kind of difficult to see all your orders is because we're using multiple crew, because when the crew is busy when it's going to the marketplace, and I think Proto had talked about that maybe that would be queuable. So I wonder if that's still in the works.
Yes. Yeah, I mentioned that earlier. That is something we're looking at in the very near future.
Brilliant. I missed that. Sorry.
Question from Skepo. Is this something that we will be doing at all, or has it been scoped out in terms of, can you source materials from different storages? I'm assuming you're talking about if you want to run a refinery process and you want to source from 3 different warehouses. Is that possible, or is that something that we're going to be working on? Chris, maybe?
Yeah. So like, for example, I was talking earlier about the tank farm, and the reason why it can also hold powders is because right now you can't source from multiple storage inventories, but it is something that we would like to do. It's somewhat complex, but it is something that we would like to move to, so that it allows for getting rid of those sorts of edge cases and updates to buildings that we don't really we don't really want to be in place, but need to be to kind of deal with that limitation. So it's certainly something we'd like to move towards, and is planned. I can't give a time on it just yet, though.
Okay, so when will our current crewmates be able to gain new traits, and how will that work?
Crewmates will gain new traits via the event system. So the random events that right now are giving out sway will start to provide opportunities to gain traits. That will start relatively soon. We were kind of pursuing, like I said, those other priorities being, new player acquisition and just general stability and quality of life improvements, as well as these top priorities being like the tank farm, and some of these market-oriented features. But it is very much on our list. We already have almost all of that content ready. Just a matter of implementing those individual events. So you'll see them fairly soon.
So with time about to be closing out here, Chris or Proto, do you have any updates or anything that you want to call out that you guys have been working on, or things that people should be looking forward to?
I think
I would say beyond what we've talked about.
Yep. Yeah. That's good. Get him on.
I just muted the hot mic. I know that we've covered a lot of it already, but yeah, go for it, Chris.
I was gonna say the same. I think I had like a list of things I wanted to touch on at the end, but it seems like we've touched on them all through the conversation. So, I mean, I'm excited. I can't wait to see all of these tank farms popping up. In fact, about an hour and a half after that was announced, I think we had our highest concurrent player count. So I think that a lot of you are also excited. I assume we'll see lots of them in the very near future.
Yeah, I'll close it out with just saying, and excuse my language, but thank you guys so fucking much. This has been incredible to see what happens over the last month and a half of what you guys have been doing, what you've achieved in the game, your support before, and I highly encourage you guys to share your experience in the Discord, outside the Discord, on Reddit, whatever it might be. We are doing a huge effort right now in trying to get new players in the game, but you can help us amplify that. So if you have questions or you have an idea, reach out to me, DM me anytime. We want to grow this community, and we want to do that as quickly as possible, and we are working towards that. So thank you guys again for everything. We're really excited about the new features coming, the quality of life updates, and make sure you check out the patch notes consistently as we continue to push things into the game. So thanks again, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Take care.
Thank you all. Talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.